You're probably wasting the years you have left on things that stopped mattering a long time ago. And I don't say that to be harsh or judgmental. It's not because you're careless or because you don't know any better. It's because the habits of an entire lifetime are incredibly quiet. They don't announce themselves. They don't send you a memo saying, "Hey, I'm still running in the background here, draining your energy." They just keep going. The need to always be right, those old wounds you keep picking at, the worry you've convinced yourself is the same thing as caring, that role you've been playing for so long you forgot it was just a role and not who you actually are. These things run silently in the background of every single day, costing you something you absolutely cannot afford to keep spending. Your time, your presence. That specific quality of being fully alive that's only available when you're not constantly bracing yourself against something, defending something, proving something. Buddhism understood this truth 25 centuries ago, not as some abstract philosophy floating in the clouds, but as a precise, detailed map of exactly how the human mind wastes the life it's been given, and more importantly, exactly how to stop doing that. I'm going to name 7 specific things today. 7 patterns that are quietly stealing your remaining years, and I'm going to name them plainly, directly, without sugarcoating any of it. Because if even one of these lands with you, if even one makes you pause and think, "Yes, that's exactly what I've been carrying around," then what follows might be one of the most useful things you hear all year. This is about real wisdom that you can actually use. So let's begin. Here's the first one: the need to still be right. You know this moment I'm talking about. You're sitting at the dinner table, maybe it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's just some random Sunday in November, and you say something you know from experience, something you've earned the right to say because you actually lived through it, not because you read it somewhere or heard it from someone else. You offer this piece of wisdom carefully, with good intentions, the way you've been offering things your whole life, and it just drops into the conversation like a stone into still water. No ripple. Nothing. Your daughter nods politely and changes the subject. Your son-in-law has already mentally moved on to something else. The grandkids are physically present, but mentally they're on another planet. Nobody asks you to elaborate. Nobody wants to hear more. Nobody follows up at all. And somewhere beneath the surface of your awareness, not quite anger, but something older and quieter than that, something contracts inside you. You might not even call it what it really is. You might label it frustration. You might tell yourself you're just tired of not being heard, of being invisible. But if you sit with it honestly, if you really look at it in the quiet darkness later, it's something closer to this. I'm still here. I still matter. Why is nobody acting like it? The Buddha had a word for this. He called it Māna. It usually gets translated as pride or conceit, but those words are way too loud for what Māna actually is. Māna is quieter than pride. It's this deep structural need of the self to be measured, to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be recognized as significant, to have your presence actually register in the room. And here's the thing you need to understand. Māna is not a character flaw. It's not evidence that something's broken in you. For most of your life, Māna actually served you. It made you work harder. It made you show up when you could have easily walked away. It made you care about doing things well, about being respected, about leaving something behind that actually mattered. Māna was fuel for a good life, but there comes a point, and a lot of us hit it somewhere in our later years, when Māna stops being fuel and becomes a drain. Because the self that constantly needs to be respected is a self that's always quietly terrified. Terrified that without the acknowledgement, without the deference, without being consulted and valued, it might discover there's actually nothing left. Comment below and let me know what time it is where you are and where in the world you're watching this from. I love knowing this wisdom is reaching people everywhere. Think about someone you might know, or maybe this is you, who retired after 30 years of being at the center of everything. Decisions flowed through them. Their word carried real weight. Their opinion actually shaped outcomes and changed things. And then one specific Friday afternoon, all of that ended. There was a retirement party, people gave speeches, there was cake, and then with very little ceremony, the phone calls stopped coming, the emails dried up, And now at family dinners, in conversations with their adult children, in rooms where decisions are being made, they find themselves still running the meeting in their head, still rehearsing what should have been said, still composing the argument that would have changed the outcome if only someone had asked, still offering opinions that arrived just a beat too late or that nobody actually requested. The meeting ended years ago, but the mind never got that message. This is what Māna does when it's no longer being fed by external structures and validation. It turns inward and just keeps working. It rehearses, it resents, it finds small slights and blows them up into major offenses. It spends energy, real finite precious energy that you don't have unlimited amounts of anymore, managing situations that are already completely over. One of my teachers used to say something I've never forgotten. A still lake doesn't need the wind to prove its water. Read that again slowly. You don't need to be consulted on every single family decision to have wisdom. You don't need your adult children to follow your advice for your life to have mattered. You don't need applause or recognition or constant validation to be at peace. These external things were never what made you worthy in the first place. They were simply the forms, the containers, through which a worthy life expressed itself at that particular time. And those forms change, seasons turn. That's not a loss. That's just life moving the way life moves. I want to name the resistance you're probably feeling right now because it deserves to be acknowledged. This teaching is not about becoming invisible. It's not about accepting disrespect or pretending your decades of experience have no value. Your experience has enormous value. The things you've lived through contain wisdom that cannot be taught in any classroom. Wisdom most people around you haven't had to earn yet through their own survival. The question isn't whether the wisdom is real. The wisdom is absolutely real. The question is whether you need other people to see it and acknowledge it in order for you to be at peace. There's a huge difference between having wisdom and needing to be seen having it. The first one is yours completely, regardless of whether anyone acknowledges it or not. The second one makes your inner peace completely dependent on other people's attention and approval. And that's a very shaky, uncertain place to live. So the next time you feel that familiar contraction at dinner, in a conversation, when a decision gets made without consulting you, try this. Before you speak, before you withdraw into silent resentment, before you start that mental rehearsal, take one slow, deliberate breath. And ask yourself with complete honesty, do I want to be understood right now, or do I just want to be right? Those are two totally different things, and knowing which one you're actually after changes everything about what you do next. Real dignity in this season of life isn't about being respected by other people. It's about respecting yourself enough that you don't need their constant confirmation to feel whole. The second thing quietly stealing your years is this: the wounds you keep returning to. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. Not out loud to me, but quietly to yourself. How much of your day, your mental and emotional energy, do you spend inside a memory that hurts you? I'm not talking about sweet nostalgia for something beautiful that's past. I'm talking about the other kind, a betrayal, an injustice, something someone did to you, maybe a friend, a sibling, a spouse, even one of your own children, something that was genuinely wrong, genuinely painful, something that absolutely deserved to be felt and processed. And it happened years ago, maybe even decades ago. And yet here it is again, arriving without any invitation, the way it always does. Your body tightens before the thought is even fully formed in your mind. Your jaw sets, your chest closes up slightly, and suddenly you're right back there. Back in that room where it happened, back in that conversation, back in the exact moment of impact, experiencing it as fully as if absolutely no time has passed at all. The original wound didn't stop hurting, but here's something worth looking at really carefully. The wound happened then, back in the past, but the pain is happening right now, right this second, in your body, in your breath, in that contraction around your heart that nobody else in the room can even see. The Buddha taught something he called the second arrow. The teaching goes like this: if someone shoots you with an arrow, that's painful, that's real pain. That's the first arrow. And it wasn't your fault. You didn't ask for it. You didn't deserve it. But then, in the moments and hours and years that follow, If you pick up a second arrow and drive it into that same wound over and over and over, revisiting the pain, rehearsing the story, returning to that room again and again, that second arrow is completely yours. You're the one holding it. You're the one choosing it, even when it doesn't feel like a choice at all. The first arrow wasn't your fault, but the second one, that's something entirely different. Let me tell you about someone. I'll call her Margaret. Margaret was in her late 60s when I first sat down with her. She was warm, intelligent, genuinely funny when she wanted to be. She had 4 grandchildren she absolutely adored. She'd built what looked from the outside like a full, complete life, and she hadn't spoken to her sister in 22 years. The reason was real. I want to be very clear about that. Her sister had done something genuinely harmful. A deep betrayal of trust that cut to the bone and had lasting consequences. I'm not dismissing that at all. Some wounds are absolutely earned by the person who inflicted them. Some things are genuinely wrong. But here's what I noticed as we talked. Margaret didn't mention her sister once in our conversation. She mentioned her 7 times. 7 different times in a single conversation that was supposed to be about completely other things. The wound found its way to the surface again and again and again. Her voice changed when it arrived. It got sharper, younger somehow, like she'd time-traveled back to the moment it happened and couldn't quite find the door back home to the present. The rest of her face stayed in the present moment, but something in her eyes went somewhere else entirely. After about the 4th time it came up, I asked her gently, "How much of your day would you say you spend thinking about this?" She got really quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I suppose most of it. 22 years. Most of every single day spent mentally living in a room that the other person might not even remember building, might have completely moved on from. This is what the second arrow actually costs. Not dramatically, not in one big crisis, but in the slow, steady daily expenditure of your most precious, non-renewable resource. Your attention, your presence, your aliveness in the day that's actually happening. All of it spent on a wound that already happened, to a person who may have changed completely, in a moment that no longer exists anywhere except inside your own mind." Now I want to say something that I know is going to meet resistance, and I'm going to say it anyway, because it matters too much not to. Forgiveness is not something you give to the person who wronged you. Forgiveness is something you give to yourself. This is important enough to say differently. You're not forgiving them because they deserve it. You're not forgiving them because what they did was acceptable or okay. You're not forgiving them because the relationship should be repaired, or because they've changed, or because you owe them anything at all. You're forgiving because you deserve to stop being the one who carries this weight. Because the wound is living in your body, not theirs. Because the cost of holding on to it, that slow daily cost, is entirely yours and yours alone. In Buddhist practice, Mettā, loving kindness, begins with yourself. And one of its most radical expressions is this: offering compassion to yourself for all the years you've spent in pain. Not guilt about the time already lost. Compassion. You keep returning to that wound because pain is a groove the mind knows how to follow. That's not weakness, that's just what an untrained mind naturally does. You're not broken. You were simply never shown the way out, never given the door. So the next time an old wound surfaces, and it will, try this simple practice. Before you follow it all the way back into that room, pause, take 3 slow breaths, and say quietly to yourself, "That was then, I am here now." Not denial, not pretending it didn't happen or didn't cost you something, not erasing the reality of what occurred, simply choosing, one more time, to come back to the breath that's happening right now, the life that is still, even now, unfolding in front of you. You cannot rewrite the past, but you can absolutely stop letting it write your present. The third thing is the worry you mistake for love. When was the last time you slept through an entire night without your mind spinning towards something you cannot fix? Your daughter's struggling marriage. Your son's finances that seem shaky. That grandchild who seems withdrawn lately, quieter than usual, harder to reach. The medical test results that need follow-up. The political situation, the economy, the state of everything everywhere all at once. If you're really honest, there's probably a low constant hum of anxiety that's been present for so long, it started to feel like just the normal background texture of being alive. not acute, not dramatic, just there. The steady background noise of a mind that loves people, it cannot protect living in a world it cannot control. And I want to say something about this really carefully because I don't want to be dismissive of what's real here. This worry comes from love. The worry about your children, about the people you've built your entire life around, that's not pathology, that's attachment in its most deeply human form. You worry because you love. The two feelings are bound together so tightly for most people that they feel like the exact same thing. But they're not the same thing. Worry is love that has lost trust. Lost trust in the person it loves. Lost trust in life itself. And more than that, worry is often the very last room where control still feels possible. When you can't fix the actual situation, when you can't intervene, when your children are fully grown and making their own choices and the world is doing what the world does, the mind finds one thing it can still do. It can think about the problem, it can turn it over and over, it can imagine terrible outcomes, it can rehearse responses, it can prepare for disasters that may never actually arrive. The mind calls this caring, calls it being responsible, but what it really is at its root is the absolute refusal to accept that you are not the author of every story you love. The Buddha taught Anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. Everything is in constant flux. The body, the seasons, the people we love most, the nations we live in, the very thoughts moving through our minds right this second. Not one single thing in the entire universe has stayed exactly the same for even 2 consecutive moments. This isn't a pessimistic teaching designed to make you depressed. It's actually a deeply liberating one. Because what it means in practice is this: the world is going to keep changing whether you worry about it or not. Your children are going to make their own choices whether you lose sleep over them or not. The news cycle will unfold whether you watch it obsessively for 2 hours and then watch it again or whether you don't. I can already hear the objection forming in your mind, and I want to meet it directly before it has time to settle and harden. If I stop worrying, does that mean I don't care? No. Absolutely not. And this distinction matters more than almost anything else in this entire teaching. Caring and worrying are not the same action. They're not the same thing at all. Caring says, I love this person, I'm here, I will do what I actually can. Worrying says, I love this person, and I cannot bear that the outcome isn't in my hands, that I can't control it. One opens, one contracts, one is a genuine gift to the person you love. The other is a burden you carry completely alone while they remain mostly unaware you're even carrying it. Picture 2 circles, one inside the other. The outer circle contains everything that worries you. Your children's choices, the economy, the headlines, other people's pain, climate change, politics, all the vast uncertain futures. The inner circle contains only what you can actually do something about today, right now. The phone call you can make, the presence you can offer, the conversation you can have, the 5 minutes of stillness you can choose for your own mental health. Most of what occupies your worry lives in that outer circle. You cannot touch it. You can think about it indefinitely and nothing will move or change. Put your energy in the inner circle instead. Not because the outer circle doesn't matter, it absolutely matters, but because the outer circle doesn't need your suffering. Where action is possible, it needs your action, and where action isn't possible, it needs your acceptance. Not indifference. Acceptance. The hard-earned wisdom of someone who has finally understood the limits of their reach and has stopped mistaking mental exhaustion for love. Notice the next time worry arrives, where it actually lives in your body. The shoulders that rise up without being asked, the jaw that tightens, the chest that narrows slightly as if making itself smaller, protecting itself. That physical sensation is not the feeling of love, that's the feeling of control being lost and your body bracing hard against that loss. You can love people deeply, powerfully, without bracing. That's the practice. The 4th thing is the role you forgot to put down. For decades, you were the one. You were the person who held everything together when it started falling apart, the provider who made absolutely sure the bills got paid, and the children were fed and the household kept functioning. The caretaker who stayed up all night with sick kids, who drove people to appointments, who managed 1,000 invisible details that kept a family actually working. The one who showed up when nobody else did, who answered the call, absorbed the crisis, kept a steady face when steadiness was what everyone needed. That wasn't a role you were playing. That was who you were, your identity. And then gradually, or maybe all at once, circumstances changed. The children grew up and left. The career came to its natural end. The person you were caring for either recovered or passed away. The structure that required your specific presence in that specific form shifted completely, and the role remained, not because anyone was demanding it anymore, not because the situation still required it in the same way, but because when you've been something for 30 or 40 years, you forget that it was ever a choice. It calcifies into identity. You stop being someone who does the caretaking. You become the caretaker. Period. As if the role and the self were the exact same thing, and removing one would completely remove the other. The Buddhist concept here is Upādāna, clinging. Not clinging to external things, but clinging to the very shape of yourself. Holding on to an identity past the season it was meant to serve. Because that identity gave meaning. It gave direction. It gave you a clear place to put your energy. Every morning when you woke up, you knew exactly what needed to be done. Imagine a stage. The play has finished. The audience has gone home. The set has been completely struck, furniture removed, lights dimmed. The other actors are already out of costume and on their way to dinner, moving on with their lives. And one actor remains, still in full character, still delivering lines perfectly from memory with total commitment to a completely empty house. Not tragic exactly. Just unaware that the play ended. This is what it looks like when a role becomes a cage without anyone even locking the door. It looks like still organizing everyone else's schedule, even though they're fully grown adults who didn't ask for your help. Still offering advice that arrives before anyone requested it. Still making yourself indispensable to people who have quietly, competently developed their own methods, their own lives, their own ways of doing things. Because if you stop being needed, you're genuinely not sure what's left. Still waiting to be needed before you allow yourself to rest. I want to offer you a moment of recognition here. Not judgment. Recognition. The next time you find yourself managing something that wasn't actually asked of you, or staying busy in service of someone else's life rather than your own, pause just long enough to ask yourself this. Am I doing this because I actually have to, or because I don't know how to stop? That question is not an accusation, it's an opening, a doorway. And here's the thing I most want you to hear in this moment. You are allowed to want something for yourself. Not after everyone else is completely settled, not when things finally calm down, not after you've earned it through enough service, enough sacrifice, enough years of putting yourself dead last. Now, right now, you're allowed to want something for yourself now. This is not selfishness. Selfishness is complete indifference to others. What I'm describing is something else entirely. The recognition that you are also someone. That your presence, your desires, your need for rest and meaning and joy, these things deserve space in your own life. That a life spent entirely in service of others with absolutely nothing kept back for yourself is not virtue, it's disappearance. And you have not disappeared, you're still here. And these remaining years, however many there are, they belong to you too. The fifth thing is the body you declared war against. There's a moment most people never talk about openly. You wake up on some completely ordinary morning, nothing special about the day, and something hurts that didn't hurt before. Or you reach for something and feel the effort required in a way you didn't used to feel it. Or you catch a glimpse of yourself in the bathroom mirror in that particular early morning light, and for just a fraction of a second, the face looking back actually surprises you. It's not the face you still feel like on the inside. Inside you're still something else, something earlier, someone younger. And then the moment passes and you get on with your day, but underneath the getting on with it, something else is happening, something quieter and way more corrosive, a low-grade war, the body as inconvenience, the body as betrayal, the body as a system that's failing to perform according to specifications. Specifications that were set 30 years ago by a life that no longer exists in the same form. You push through tiredness because you've always pushed through. You ignore the signals your body sends because attending to them feels like defeat, like giving up. You sometimes apologize for what your body can no longer do, as if it has personally let you and everyone else down, as if the natural changing is somehow a failure rather than just a fact of being alive. This is a form of suffering almost nobody names directly, not the physical pain itself. The pain has a name, but the relationship with the pain, the grief over a body that's changing against your wishes, and the way that resisting that change, fighting it, resenting it, insisting it should be otherwise, the way that doubles the suffering. What hurts once becomes what hurts, plus what you cannot accept hurts. 2 layers of pain for the price of 1. The body's completely natural change and then your endless argument with it. The Buddha's teaching on dukkha, on suffering, points to this again and again. It's not the difficult thing itself that creates most of our suffering, it's our resistance to it. The mind's absolute refusal to allow reality to be what it already is. Picture a river, not some gentle stream. A real river with serious force behind it. It doesn't fight against its banks, it moves with them. Not because the river has no power, it has enormous power. But because force directed against a completely fixed structure wastes what could be flow, what could be movement. The river finds the channel that's actually available and moves through it fully, completely, with everything it has, within the shape that actually exists. The body in later life is not failing you. It's changing. And those are not at all the same thing. One is defeat, the other is a season. I can hear the resistance to this, and I want to meet it before it settles. This sounds like giving up. Like accepting decline without any resistance, like choosing passivity over self-care. It's actually the complete opposite. There's a crucial difference between acceptance and surrender. Accepting what the body actually is right now, in this specific season, does not mean neglecting it. It means tending it honestly in the form it actually has, rather than the form you desperately wish it still had. It's the difference between a gardener who tends their garden in autumn, clearing, composting, preparing, honoring what the season actually calls for, and a gardener who insists the tomatoes should still be growing in November and wastes the entire month in a pointless argument with the calendar. Tomorrow morning, try this. Not as a task, not as one more discipline you have to be good at. Simply notice, before you push through, before you override the signal, before you apologize for what your body cannot do anymore, place one hand gently on whatever part of you is tired or sore or slower than you expect, and instead of managing it or fixing it or being frustrated by it, just for 30 seconds, listen to it. Not to fix, not to judge, just to acknowledge that this body has carried you through absolutely everything, and it's still here, and that is not nothing. The war with your own body is one you literally cannot win, but peace with it, that's available any morning you choose it. The 6th thing is the self you forgot to come back for. I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask it plainly without softening it because the soft version doesn't actually land the same way. When was the last time you did something, not for a child, not for a grandchild, not for a neighbor, not because someone needed you, not out of obligation or habit or because it was your turn to show up, but simply because you wanted it? Not a vacation that had to work around everyone else's schedule, not a meal chosen because it was easiest for everyone, not a phone call made because you felt you should check in, something that was yours, entirely, unambiguously, unapologetically yours, something that when you were doing it, you weren't thinking about anyone else at all. Take a real moment with that question. Notice what comes up. For many people in this season of life, the question itself creates a kind of discomfort, a faint sense of guilt, a feeling that wanting something just for yourself is somehow beside the point, or self-indulgent, or a little embarrassing, as if by this stage you should have moved beyond such things. That discomfort you're feeling right now, that's not proof the question is wrong. That discomfort is actually the teaching itself. In Buddhist practice, Mettā, loving kindness, begins with the self, not as indulgence, not as selfishness, as foundation. The teaching is not that you matter more than other people. The teaching is that you cannot genuinely offer what you have never genuinely received, including from yourself. You've probably heard the saying, "You can't pour from an empty cup." It's true. But it misses something deeper. The person who has spent literal decades placing themselves last doesn't simply have an empty cup. They've often completely forgotten they have a cup at all. They've become so deeply habituated to giving, to showing up, to managing, to anticipating everyone else's needs, that they've lost track of the question of what they themselves actually need. They don't just have nothing left to give, they've lost the ability to receive. Even when something is offered to them, rest, attention, care, they deflect it, pass it along immediately, make sure someone else is comfortable before they sit down themselves. They know how to perform giving. They've completely forgotten how to simply be. Picture a compass, the kind a real navigator uses, the needle always finding north. Now imagine that for 40 years that compass has been set not to magnetic north, but to everyone else's north. To the children's needs, the spouse's preferences, the aging parent's care, the employer's demands, the neighbor's crisis, always orienting outward, always pointing away from yourself. The needle doesn't break, it doesn't stop working, it simply forgets where the actual owner stands. Recalibrating that compass, genuinely asking what you actually want, what actually matters to you, what your own north is, that's not selfishness, it's the only way to find out where you actually are. Here's the hard truth, and I'm going to say it plainly because you've earned the plain version. Many people at this stage of life have spent so long placing themselves last that it's become identity, not just habit. I am the one who sacrifices. I am the one who doesn't need much. I am the one who waits. These feel like virtues. From a certain angle, they look like virtues. But look again more carefully. They're actually the residue of a life lived in constant reaction to everyone else's needs. A life in which your own presence, your own desires, your own basic right to exist with some spaciousness were quietly negotiated away year by year in the name of love and duty. And what got negotiated away like that doesn't just come back on its own. You have to go looking for it, actively. This is not a grand dramatic gesture. This is not a bucket list or some massive reinvention of yourself. It's something much smaller and much more immediately available. This week, just this 1 week, find one thing, one single thing that belongs entirely to you, not useful to anyone else, not productive, not scheduled because someone needed you somewhere. Something that when you imagine it creates a small quiet opening in your chest rather than a sense of obligation or duty. Maybe it's sitting outside for 20 minutes with absolutely no purpose. Maybe it's reading something you've been meaning to read for literal years. Maybe it's calling someone you actually want to talk to rather than someone you feel obligated to check on. Maybe it's simply sitting with a cup of tea and letting the morning be slow without rushing into the day. Whatever it is, small, real, completely yours, do it. Not as a reward for good behavior, as a recognition that you are still here, and you still count. The self you quietly put aside decades ago to care for everyone else did not disappear. It has simply been waiting patiently for you to remember to come back. Or this version, which might be even more important. It sounds like this. I've made too many mistakes. I've wasted too many years. Peace is probably not for someone like me at this point. I've left it too late. These two versions look completely different from the outside. One is postponement, one is self-rejection. But they arrive at exactly the same place. Not here, not now, not yet, not me. The Buddhist concept of appamada is sometimes translated as non-negligence or spiritual diligence. But what I love most about it is the implication beneath the word. The refusal to waste even a single breath of this living, present, unrepeatable life in sleep when wakefulness is actually available. Now, I want to speak to both versions of this postponement. If your version is the first one, waiting for the right time, the right conditions, the right level of energy, then I want to ask you with genuine curiosity and absolutely no judgment, how long have you actually been waiting? A year? 5 years? 20? And have the conditions ever been quite right? Has that perfect moment ever arrived exactly as you imagined it would? The conditions will not improve on their own. This is not pessimism. This is what impermanence actually means in daily practice. Life does not naturally move toward stillness. Stillness is a direction you choose inside the noise, in the midst of whatever conditions exist right now, not the ones you're waiting for. If your version is the second one, if somewhere underneath everything else you carry this belief that you've left it too late, that the mistakes have piled up into something too heavy, that peace is for people who started earlier or lived more cleanly than you did, then I want to say something directly to you. The tradition we're drawing from in these conversations has always, in every single era, been absolutely full of people who arrived late. People who came to practice after decades of distraction or harm, or just ordinary human busyness. People with complicated pasts and uncertain futures. Ajahn Chah, one of the most beloved teachers in the Thai forest tradition, taught monks and laypeople and farmers and grandmothers, people of every background, every age, every personal history. He used to say that the only requirement for practice was a sincere mind, not a clean past, not a certain number of years ahead of you, a sincere mind. You do not need to be a spiritual person to take up this practice. You don't need to believe in anything you don't already believe in. You don't need to become someone you're not. You need only to become, slowly, imperfectly, without any rush at all, a little more quiet than you were yesterday. Quiet enough to hear yourself think, quiet enough to feel your breath moving in and out of your body, quiet enough to notice that you are here, right now, alive, and that this moment, ordinary and unremarkable as it seems, will never come again. Tomorrow morning, before the news, before the phone, before the coffee even, try this. Sit somewhere comfortable. Close your eyes or let them rest soft and unfocused. And for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, do absolutely nothing except feel the breath moving in and out of your body, in through the nose, out through the mouth. When your mind wanders, and it absolutely will, because that's just what minds do, that's not failure. That's not you doing it wrong. That's simply what untrained minds do. Gently, without any frustration or self-judgment, come back. Return to the breath. That's the entire practice. That's where everything begins. 5 minutes. Not because 5 minutes will magically transform everything overnight, but because 5 minutes chosen deliberately, with care for your own inner life, is proof that you believe your inner life is worth 5 minutes. And that belief, small as it seems, is actually the beginning of absolutely everything. Someday is not a day of the week. It never arrives on the calendar. The only door to peace is the one you're standing directly in front of right now. You walked into this video carrying something. Maybe you didn't name it before you clicked play. Maybe it was just that familiar weight, the one that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got, that was already there when you woke up this morning, that you've learned to carry so smoothly it barely even registers anymore. You've spent decades being the one who holds things together. You've loved people through their absolute hardest seasons. You've stayed when leaving would have been so much easier. You've managed and worried and forgiven and waited and kept going through things that required way more of you than you ever planned to give. None of that was wasted. None of it was meaningless. It was a life. It was your life, and it brought you here, to this exact moment, which is not the end of anything. It is, if you let it be, the beginning of something quieter and more truly yours than anything that came before. 7 things. Not character flaws. Old survival habits that the current season no longer requires. The need to be seen as significant. The wounds you keep returning to. The worry you call love. The role you forgot to put down. The war with your own body, the self you set aside for everyone else. The someday you keep moving forward one more year. You don't have to let all of them go at once. You can start with just one, tonight, just tonight before you sleep. Notice one moment where you chose differently, one breath taken without bracing against something, 1 minute in the entire day when you didn't return to the old wound or the old worry or the old role, one small thing that was simply yours. That's not nothing. That's the whole practice lived at its smallest and most real scale. The peace you're looking for is not somewhere you eventually get to. It's not a destination with better conditions than these. It's something that was always here, underneath the exhaustion, underneath the habit, underneath the decades of holding everything together. It has been waiting without any impatience at all for you to be ready to stop looking past it. You might be ready now. You wouldn't still be here if some part of you wasn't. In the comments below, I read every single one. I want to ask you this. Of the 7 things we talked about today, which one are you most ready to set down? You don't have to have already done it. Just which one do you know somewhere deep down has been costing you the most? Tell me. I'll be there reading. And if this teaching opened something in you, if it named what you've been carrying or pointed towards something you might finally be ready to set down, like and subscribe to Buddhism. Focus for more videos like this. Because quiet wisdom is a place to return to, a space to come back to on the mornings when the weight is present again and you need to remember there's another way. May you be well. May you be peaceful. May you be free.